This little fellow looks like an ordinary house cat, but he isn't. He's a bobcat. Gorgeous, wild, and a vicious predator. They become gray in winter for better camouflage. We have about 900 of them in Connecticut. To better understand bobcats, let's visit the D.M. Hunt Library in Falls Village, where Master Wildlife Conservationist Ginny Apple is about to speak.
All right, hi everybody. Well, welcome. It's a nice group. I first thought everybody's out swimming today because it's so warm out, but it's nice in here. You got a nice little library here in town. I like it very much. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. My name's Ginny Apple. I'm a Master Wildlife Conservationist. I took a 40-hour training with the DEEP, and I always say DEEP because I think combining energy with environment to me doesn't make sense. So it used to be DEP, but they consolidated to save money, I think. So anyway, my background, I grew up on a ranch in Texas, so I've always loved animals. Saw a lot of bobcats when I was young and other animals. Then I moved east and went to Columbia for grad school in journalism. I was hired by the Hartford Courant in 1974 as one of the first women sports writers in the country. I did that for about 25 years, not there. I went on to the LA Times. I was their East Coast writer. But it was nice holidays, weekends, didn't pay a lot, so, and not always the best environment for a woman, even though it didn't really affect me too much. But so then I went into communications, public relations, ended my career with Connecticut Judicial Branch, where I wrote speeches for judges, helped handle high-profile trials. I did the creative part of the website, and I was their historian and photographer, and now I'm retired. So anyway, how many have seen a bobcat in the wild? Wow, you're pretty lucky. Probably because you live in the northwest part of the state, and you're probably very wildlife oriented, whereas in other parts, you know, they think they're going to be eaten alive by wildcats and bears, beavers, you name it. So anyway, the bobcat is a very secretive wildcat, and it's been called the Spitfire of the universe because it's really a very ferocious hunter, and you know, for size and pound for pound, it's gonna like be very ferocious when it hunts. And they're pretty immune to disease, like the black bear. They don't get disease a lot, so even though they can get rabies, it's not real common. Okay. All right, so this is a Barkhamsted bobcat. As you know, if you've seen bobcats, you may have seen them out in the open, or you may have just looked over off your deck and thought someone was looking at you, and there it was. So that's what happened off my deck. I live in Barkhamsted. I'm surrounded by People's State Forest, so very lucky to have a lot of animals. So it was just looking there. This gives you a good example of some of the markings of a bobcat. They always have these ruffs hanging down on the front. Their eyes, you'll see it later in a better picture, but their eyes are always lined in white, which a lot of night hunting animals have white lined around their eyes. It helps reflect the light and make them see better at night. We'll see some other indications of what a bobcat looks like. They have the greenish yellow eyes. This is the marking on the back of the ears, very, very distinctive. Black around with the white spots. Anybody want to guess why they have white spots on the back of their ears?
It looks like eyes.
Yeah, that too, but also their babies can follow them through the brush. As they're going along, they look for those white markers. So this is one of the distinctive markings of a bobcat. So if you see an animal and you're trying to figure out what it is, if you can see the back of their ears, this will also tell you distinctly it is a bobcat. Okay. The males are larger than the females. That's not true in some species, like bald eagles. The females are always larger, but in bobcats and most cats, the males are larger. They can be up to 35 pounds, 37 inches, which is a little higher than a yardstick. The largest on record ended up in roadkill in New Hampshire, 60 pounds. So you see, they have the capability to get larger. And Females are 15 to 30 pounds, 28 to 32 inches. All this varies by food availability, but generally the length and the height stays about the same. The weight is what would fluctuate the most. Okay, so these are hunters that have caught bobcat. On the left in the Adirondacks, Racket Lake. I was just up there canoeing. I love it up there. In 2012, so it was 50 to 55 pounds. And in Wisconsin, they killed a cat in '84, 48.9 pounds. Some states, just over half the states in our country allow trapping of bobcat, but Connecticut does not. We stopped in the early '70s because we had a very small population.
Why would anyone want to kill a bobcat?
Fur.
Oh.
And hunters sometimes just like to have stuff, you know. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But the fur market was very, very active into the '70s. And even now, Russia will pay upwards of $5,000 to get a bobcat coat. So even though we don't really allow for bobcat to be trapped for those reasons, it still happens. There's a lot of poachers. So there's a lot of fur, beaver fur. The beavers were almost extirpated after the colonists came here because people would send them to Europe for hats and coats and you name it. The reason we have the Migratory Bird Act now is because people were shooting all these birds. Well, Audubon shot them to paint them, but anyway, people started shooting birds late 1800s, early 19th to make hats. So a lot of birds were becoming near extinct because of that, so they enacted these acts so that couldn't be done anymore. You can see those eyes. They have excellent eyesight. They have what's called a nictating membrane, and it's this small little piece of film that can go over their eyes when they're running in the woods, and then they don't get poked. Eagles also have that. A lot of animals have that. The big eyes, they have really large eyes proportionally to their head, which really helps them to see better. You can see like in their skull right here, very, very big eyes. Eagles also proportionately have huge eyes to the proportion of their head, and that makes them see better. The bobcat ranges in much of the continental United States, with exceptions of the Midwestern states. Anybody want to guess why?
I mean, they hunted them.
Well, a lot because of farming, agriculture. So a lot of those lands are cleared. You know, you've got corn, you've got wheat. You know, they prefer understory with some woods around, so they can hunt. So a lot of those states out in the Midwest, they just, you know, a farmer sees them and they shoot them. You know, the colonists did that to a lot of our animals when they first came here. The Native Americans would, you know, they'd take the animals they needed, you know, for warmth or for food. They didn't generally kill them because they thought they were going to kill their chickens or whatever, you know, but the colonists killed anything they thought could kill their livestock, or, you know, so we had native wolves, we had native cougars, we had native bears at the time, but they just, we had about over 500,000 eagles when the colonists came here, and by the late 1700s we had like about 50,000. So we've not always been friends to animals. Anyway, and also they say they're in the rest of the United States except for Delaware. Now, go figure, you know, it's like when I first moved up here, people told me there are no poisonous snakes in Maine. I said, well, you mean to tell me if on the border of New Hampshire and Maine, there's a timber rattler or a copperhead, it's not going to cross the line, you know? But anyway, apparently just the habitat in Delaware, when you take account the roads, the water, you know, it's a little chopped up state. But the funny thing is Delaware State, guess what their mascot is? Bobcats. It doesn't make any sense, does it? Anyway, we do ask that if you see certain animals, right now we're doing a bobcat study, we're trying to determine our population. There's probably, the estimate of bobcats in the contiguous United States is about 1.5 to 2 million. One thing we've learned is they don't stay in one place for long. They move around. They have like resting dens, so in their territory, like a bobcat will increase its territory by food availability. So a male might range up to 50 miles, which seems a lot for a little legged critter, but the females generally stay within about a 10-mile range. And the females do not tolerate other females in their territory. They'll let the males pass through, and they're not monogamous. You know, they mate with various other males. All right, so they're very prodigious climbers. Again, their habitat, they like to have low-cut land, but they also like to be on the edge of forests, you know, because that's where a lot of those little critters they like to eat are. Their most favored way of hunting is to lie on the ground, like you saw that one in that grass, and they'll just sit there and wait forever and ever. And you've probably seen your kitty exhibit similar behaviors. It'll see something come by, it can go from sitting down and pounce 10 to 12 feet. And they're very, very good swimmers. You wouldn't think so because your cat doesn't like a bath, right? But bobcats can swim across lakes. They do that sometimes to find more food. It used to be that rabbit were primarily what bobcat liked to eat. I mean, that was the, 85%. We're losing our New England cottontails, so now we only have eastern cottontails. So that's cut down our population of rabbits. The reason we're losing that is, again, development. They prefer that what's called early successional habitat, so it'd be, brush like you saw before. And the reason you see a lot of these DEP cutting a lot of wood is not really for the money. They're trying to create different habitats. Because as development encroaches, not so much up here, some of that habitat. And so we're seeing, a little bit rise and uptick in the numbers of the New England cottontails. They can take turkeys, and that's a pretty small bobcat, likely, not a young one, but perhaps a female. But they can take them and they drag them. Probably going to drag this over to an area to cache it, maybe eat a little, and then go on its way. They have been known to take deer, usually in the winter when the deer are weaker and the snow's deep. They'll jump off of a tree or a rock onto the back, bite on the vertebrae, then they go underneath and start slashing the throat. I mean, they're the Spitfires, kind of gross, but they are very, very vicious hunters, and they can kill whatever they get pretty quickly. So anyway, their tracks, everybody's like, oh my god, a bobcat was in my yard. So we come over there and we're like, there's claws there, not a bobcat, because cats don't show their claws when they're walking. The only time you'd see a bobcat's claws are if it's like about to jump, if it's digging in or something. But the cat species do not show their claws. And when a bobcat's running, and they don't really chase their prey, like I said, most of the time. They're not hunting them. But when they do run, their hind foot registers into where their front foot was. That muffles sound, so that's just a built-in way of them being quieter. So. Okay, so the tracks. The interesting thing about wild animals is they have a utility of walking. They don't want to waste any time. When you hike with your dogs, they're like this. They're like helter-skelter. So you figure you went 3 miles, they went 6, right? Wild animal goes straight because why waste the energy? Go as straight as you can. So this is a bobcat track through. Now the next track, what do you think that is? It's a bobcat dragging its prey.
Oh.
So we can't say it could have been a squirrel, who knows what, but that's the prey going along. So, forest determined a lot of our animals. So when the settlers first came here, we were almost 100% forest, which is hard to believe because, we have shore, but I mean, not quite 100%. But as the colonists came, they cut all the forests down, killed all what they perceived dangerous animals, because they were farming, so they used the wood to make houses. They sent a ton of wood to Europe for masts on ships, for furniture, because we had a lot of trees that they didn't have at the time. You know, they had the Native Americans trap beaver, you know, and sold their pelts, whereas I said the Native Americans would use natural resources, but only what they needed. But the colonists just came and used everything. So, hey, well, thanks for coming out. I've got some handouts here. I never give them out beforehand because I don't want you reading while I'm talking. So.